think we are good. Okay. So we're live. Sweet. All right. So anyway, welcome everybody to AI Observatory. I'm the host here, Tim Schulz. I'm the CEO of Starseer, and today we have Trey, who is the adversary emulation lead at SCYTHE. And so I mean, Trey, welcome. And Trey and I have been talking a lot about some of the challenges we've been seeing with both like how to adopt AI and like what security teams are doing with it, as well as, we'll get into, if anyone's been following the, AI agent Reddit called, Moltbook, like we're going to talk about some of that stuff too. But anyway, just wanted to say thanks for coming on, Trey, and chatting with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This should be an interesting conversation. I know it's been hard for us to save some of it for the live stream, so
yes, which is I think a good thing.
So where do we want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say let's start with the just general like how security teams are like starting to think about I guess AI overall, and like trying to figure out like how to wrap their heads around it. Like what have you seen? Like what's been your experience as a security practitioner, like saying, all right, where do I use these tools? Where do I like say I'm going to leave them be? Like what's kind of that approach you've taken?
I've been seeing some really interesting stuff lately. I mean, for those that don't know who we are at SCYTHE and what we're all about, a lot of my job is running purple team engagements for people and helping them assess their security controls, things like that. So I've kind of gotten a good view of how people are using it in day-to-day life right now, especially in that security analyst role. On one hand, I'm seeing a lot of people, it's becoming a really strong and powerful pipeline and giving them a way to dev up specific like technologies or apps or ways for them to validate stuff much faster than they would have before. So like an example would be validating detections or helping create and write new rules for their particular tooling, things like that. And it's speeding up that time for detection development and their ability to respond that much more. On the flip side, I'm almost seeing it cause some weird domino effects in how analysts operate. So I've seen it quite frequently where teams are almost reliant on the built-in LLM now in their security tooling. Like I know CrowdStrike and Sentinel all have their specific ones. Sentinel-1 has Purple AI. Like all of the major vendors have some form of like chatbot or LLM to help search through your logs for you now. But the problem is that has to be trained on something, right? It has to understand the context and what it's looking at, and you have to provide it proper context in the form of a proper question. If you just say, hey, did something weird happen with a new user? It's going to give you an appropriate response, right? So I've been seeing a lot of that happening where teams are almost becoming too reliant on it, and the returns and responses from that AI now is incomplete or only a part of the picture or not even surfacing anything relevant. So I'm almost starting to see them shift away from using their brain to the AI can tell me where bad is. And I think it's still a little too early for that.
Yeah, I feel like that's something like over-reliance has been something. I think it's been like since the first like OWASP top 10 for LLMs, and now there's like 20 different fragmentations of OWASP top 10 for AI. But I think like over-reliance, right? And that it's really difficult to like get that easy answer and then say, actually, I'm going to like push through this and like check its work, right? Everyone's got lots of things to do. There's lots of alerts firing off all the time, and analysts are having to go and triage this. And I think like, especially with like, how do you start to deal with the scale, right? That we can see AI, like, because that's one of the big pitches, right? Is that, hey, this can scale a lot of like things that we've struggled to automate in the past, right? Whether it's the amount of discovery that can happen, pulling together different contexts. It feels like that's like a challenge that I haven't really seen tackled yet on it, especially the defensive side. We've seen offense has been able, like through bug bounty, through Expo, some of that stuff where you see a lot of like focus on like, hey, we can create a ton more data, right? We can have bug hunting at scale, and you see like there's all sorts of discussions about that. But I think the challenge is there's kind of not been an offsetting measure, right, for defenders yet, where we have defenders are able to tackle patching or fixing some of these bugs at scale, because I think that's going to be like that's, and so you have overloaded defenders that then are essentially dealing with an AI generated, scale of bugs and problems, while not having the ability to essentially also leverage it quite as well for defensive purposes. I mean, would that be a fair like characterization?
I think that's a very fair take on it, and I think it's a tale as old as time, right? That's always the issue we've had: is what can you do with a bare minimum budget, bare minimum staff, and make it all happen yesterday?
Yes.
And I don't think that's ever going to change, regardless if we implement AI. I mean, it's a very powerful tool, and that's exactly what it is it's a tool. I've seen a lot of teams really flourish with it and do some pretty cool stuff. But like you said, that over reliance, I think, is going to be the Achilles heel for a lot of people, where they're going to start missing stuff because they're not doing the basics. They're not focusing on trust but verify. Like, yeah, cool. The tool showed you something, said it's good, but how do you know? Like, that's our game, right? On the defensive side, is you need to constantly validate, verify, understand what's happening. And if you're not doing that, how are you protecting your organization and what you're doing?
Yeah, I think that sort of gets to like one of the things with AI right now is like it's there's a lot of like different descriptions of it, but it's like I've heard like I think it's like the jagged frontier or different like capabilities, right? Where you have like AI does really well at something, and then people sort of assume like, okay, it's done well at this, now it's going to do well at all of those similar things, and it's actually that's not the case at all. And I think the challenge is you really have to like you have to play with it. You have to experiment with it. You have to essentially go and use this, and you have to go and find what are those things that it actually does really well at, and then what are the places that it really struggles. And I think that's a place where talking to security teams and even AI security teams like have struggled, I think, to get like security practitioners as a whole are sort of right, we're all skeptical by nature. I think that's kind of why we've gotten into some of this, and there's so much hype around AI that it's like, oh, like the like combating that is like taking the exact opposite, right? Like, okay, if people are hyping it up, we're going to say it's like it's not anything worth getting excited about. But I think the challenge is that's actually left a lot of teams behind, and it means that they're not experimenting, they're not finding the places where, hey, can this convert, my Sigma rule into a specific, to our EDR, XDR, to other like rule generation, and sort of having ways of using your own expertise to verify what can AI do, what can it help me with, and where does it like fall flat. And I think that to me is kind of the place where we're seeing like this disconnect between security teams like not understanding where it can go and enable them because they're not building with it too. And I think that's kind of a challenge here, is because yes, it's a lot of times blue teams have had the budget, right, and red teams have not had quite as much or any at all in a lot of cases. Like, cool, you have people, and
This really level sets it for us now, though.
yeah, yes, yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that's like it's a big challenge, is how do we make that like how do we encourage teams to start using this more and to start like diving into like dipping their toe in the water of play like using AI for what can it do for me? Like, do you have any recommendations?
I think there's a few separate things going on here that we can think about. From a kind of policy and governance and leadership side, it's at that critical mass point that this isn't going to be something that duds and goes away. Like, it's in everything now. So we need to accept that. And as leadership, define the left and right lateral limits, because it's happening everywhere else in the world where they're shoehorning AI. You must use this to make all your copy. You must use this to do the math. You must use AI to do your job, period, or we'll fire you. We're seeing that everywhere else, but not necessarily in our field. So we need to not go that extreme, but we need to put left and right limits up of saying, hey, look, these are the approved models, the approved platforms. You can use these things, experiment with it, and let them get that phase and built into their workflow, their times, and understand it. The other side really comes down to personal use. This is something that hits really close to home for me with how widely AI is spread the world over now. And I mean, culture as a whole is kind of warping around it. My kids use it now, and it's one of those things where I'm almost permanently in incident response mode because I'm having to chase down what's the new random app some content creator recommended yesterday.
Yep.
So we need to be playing with it in our real lives to understand what these platforms are doing, where that information is going, what it can do, what it can provide you. And from there, make a determination on if it's viable in that workflow in our spaces. I know here at home, that's a good bit of my personal lifetime this last week has been just chasing down what are all of these random URLs and domains. Like I'm finding a ton of little bitty websites that content creators and gamers and things like that are recommending just out there in the wild. And obviously like the main market for that is kids, the teens, people that see this, and they're going to go try them out. They're going to try the apps. They're going to use them all. The funny thing here is you don't even need the apps for some of them, especially some of the more unrestricted ones. There are no apps. I've found some pretty weird ones that'll just let you generate anything and everything you want, but they're being peddled to kids. So like that gets kind of weird, and it's been a big rabbit hole for me.
I was gonna say, yeah, that's definitely something that I know there's been a lot of discussion, right, around like how to like age verification and some of that around AI usage, right? I feel like that was something that a lot of the AI safety teams at OpenAI and Anthropic and others have sort of discussed is some of the challenges with how this technology is being engaged in. There's lots of news stories that have been around, unfortunately, like a lot of the negative things that can happen with just completely unrestricted use. And so like I don't want to bring down the whole webcast some on that, so I'll say for folks, like there's some tragic stories that came out of that.
Yeah, but it comes down to us as leaders, and then even on my side tangent, us as parents, we need to understand it. It's not going anywhere, so we need to be able to play with it ourselves and set those left, right, lateral limits, whether that's in your family time or in your organization. But as contributors, analysts, developers, whoever you happen to be in your role, you have to understand where this is going to take you. You're going to have to put time into playing with it now. It's sooner rather than later, it's going to be a part of your workflow, whether you want it to be or not. Or you're just going to, like you said, you're going to lag behind and you're going to have to find a new job. I guess that's the harshest way to say that, right?
I mean, that is, it's been going around for a while, like, right, and I think there's different variations of it. It's like, don't be afraid of AI taking your job as somebody using AI. But I think it's, like I've seen it described as like, hey, like the new PowerPoint or whatever, like, right, that people you're expected to be able to, use Excel sheets. Using AI is just going to be an expectation. And I would say, at least when talking to people, one of the things that I'm always interested in is like the failure modes that people find out, because some of it is like, oh, hey, it hallucinates. And it's like, okay, at what? Like, give me the context of this, because just poking that hole but it's like, okay, hey, I was asking it about, and this is completely, off tangent from cybersecurity, but it shows that your hobbies and all of that actually can play into this a lot with like, freshwater aquarium fish or things like that. Like you start asking things about like using, we'll say hobby vocabulary and some of the shorthand that is in a lot of these communities for, an aquarium, calling it a, tank. And so this is something where it's like, okay, what does a tank mean in this context? And watching how LLMs, even to this day, still struggle with putting and associating all those things together, that gives me understanding of where the failure modes are that can translate to, hey, what, like when we're looking at this from a security perspective, what are things that are going to trip it up? And like, that's why you have to play around with it. You've got to experiment. And speaking of, like, apps that, maybe not even, that adults maybe, played around with too much was, let's talk about what started as Claude Bot, CLAWD, which then Anthropic lawyers decided, were like, hey, nope, this has got to change. Sounds too close to Claude. And then which became Moltbot. And then now it has settled on OpenClaw. And for anybody that this was the sort of AI assistant, that would run all the time. And it's sort of taken off. It's gone viral. And there's been lots of discussions around it. And this is where we have the like sort of Molt book, I think it was called or is
Yeah,
called, where
a little like AI Reddit.
yes, yes. And so like I've had people sending me lots of like, oh, hey, have you seen this thread? Like, look at this. And there's lots of discussions around it. But I think there's also been a stream of security findings that have come out. And I mean, this has basically been in the last week. Like, this is what I think is so interesting, exciting, frightening with how quickly some of this stuff can like go out and become like this next big thing. Is you have Andre Carpathy talking about this and like him going and using it, hey, calling it one of the most sci-fi, I think, things he's seen in a while. And so what, like, when you see some of that stuff take off, right? Like, I mean, I'll give my opinions too, but it's like, what's your first thought when you first like heard about that and saw some of these things?
I mean, some of these are pretty wild, and this is one of those. I think it's had a lot more influence over our roles right now and culture as a whole, because this is, I think, is the first big one I've heard of since the whole CrowdStrike stuff happened, where it hit mainstream news. Like, I just saw an article on CNBC talking about OpenClaw. I was like, oh, okay, so we're at that level now.
Yes.
But this boils down to a lot of doing the basics well. And this is exposing all of that. In this one thing, we've opened up there's at least a dozen holes that people have already reported on.
Oh yeah.
When it comes to the malicious skills and apps in the marketplace, open authentication, like ports protocols, like they're just basically exposed to the world. There's so much going on here right now that it's like, where do you start?
I was gonna say, let's dive into some of those, because for people that haven't been paying attention to all this, like Wiz, Palo Alto, there's been a number of people that came out like within like 24, 48 hours that were like, oh, hey, the database, like similar to DeepSeek, the database was just hanging open, and this didn't even require really diving into the app that much, and you could pull everybody's API keys and things like that. And of course, a lot of these API keys, like these are things that info stealers, I think, were also updated within 24 hours of this going viral to start like essentially trying to steal people's crypto wallets and things like that, where it was essentially this unrestricted way for people to have AI agents interact. And of course, then people would seed the places that those agents are going with either malicious or prompt injected instructions. And so there, and like Trey, like you mentioned, there's just a lot of issues here. And I think, like, I want to get to the implications of this for longer term in a minute, but I think this uptick in like how quickly some of this stuff has taken off and how quickly adversaries have gone to take advantage of it, I think is a really, like, I don't know if it's a case study quite yet on supply chain security, but it really illustrates the point that this is something that organizations have to start taking into account more.
Oh, I 100% believe it is. And I actually just posted about something, I will say, is yesterday, the day before, where I was like, I have a feeling 2026 is going to be the year of supply chain. Because it's been a week and I've seen 4 different articles from 4 different vendors about something wrong in their supply chain. I mean, we've got this OpenClaw, CloudBot, one, the Ask Gordon weakness with Docker. Nobody really knew about that. Just got published yesterday. What else was it? There was
Notepad plus, I think.
Yep, Notepad plus. It's not AI related, but that's still supply chain, right? And
yep,
it opens up a scarier can of worms for everyone, where yes, this is new technology. This is something we have in our environment, but are we still doing the foundational things right? Are you understanding what assets and software are used in your organization? Do you even have inventories for those kinds of things? If the answer right now in 2026 is no, you're already behind the curve. And this is going to cause huge headaches for you, right? How do you answer that existential question that everyone's management went at them with this week of, wow, that's really scary. Are we affected? Should we do something? If you don't know if your devs are using Notepad++ in the environment, or if you even allow them to use these kind of not OpenAI, but AI platforms and open source tooling, all these different things, and you have no real way of tracking that down or even having an idea, what do you do? It seems like, a third of the cybersecurity world just caught an incident response case this week.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, and I think though you hit on a larger thing that sort of bridges like both cybersecurity and AI, which is like asset inventory, asset management, and not only that, we have what we have essentially put as assets as an organization have like grown, right? A ton, because it used to be, right, like, hey, maybe one laptop per person or something like that. But now it's like, all right, who has what software? What are the identities of these things? What are the permissions? And so it starts to explode out per person. And I know this is something that's been a challenge for a lot of folks. Again, going back to our security teams always have some sort of limitation when it comes to resources, when it comes to like people. And so the question becomes like, how do we start tackling this, right? Like with when I'm in charge of trying to like dive into how do I identify like, well, so let's pick, the open claw. Like, how do I start identifying inside the organization all of the places that this could live, right? How do I do detection engineering? Just like actually start looking at like what are those things I need to be looking for? Like, how is that like going through that, I'll say, hunt process changed via like versus like traditional threat hunting from the past? Like, what are some of those things that you see?
Well, this comes down to some really interesting stuff, right? Because there's simultaneously like two different modalities we could be potentially thinking of or looking at. Are they using everything like, are we local only sandboxed, or are we using something that's connecting back out into the World Wide Web, doing all of that kind of fun stuff? So now you're thinking in two different realms, basically. Am I looking at NetFlow, trying to see if anybody's going to this GitHub or to these other potential marketplaces for models and things like that? Or are you looking on the endpoint trying to identify the different type of like the model file types, like looking for those specific extensions, like Pickle, Onyx, things like that? Or like looking for the actual applications that are running them for you, like the runtime. I think we talked about that the other day. The runtime now for Onyx is built into Windows 11.
Yes, this has been a hidden wall bass. I'm like 99% sure since like I think 2017. Like everyone has like it's just been lurking there. And like I think Dreadnought and some people have highlighted like essentially using some of that for like C2-less malware, right? And more intelligent malware, just from sort of proving out some of the research.
Yep.
But
But then,
yeah.
like taking that a step further now, let's think about your infrastructure.
Mhm.
Is Docker one of your primary routes of hosting and managing things? Do you have the installs or updates that were vulnerable to that particular weakness with Ask Gordon? Are you even have that kind of features turned on? Like, there's a lot of stuff you can start looking at and hunting towards to try and answer those questions. It's still a kind of an unopened can of worms out
Yes.
there on the IR side. Even from a detection perspective, like how do you identify AI traffic from regular traffic? How do you identify a pickle file on disk that's an AI model as opposed to some other, say like a graphics file or sound file or whatever file types happen to use it? Like, how do you know it's bad? Or even then, like how do you know the one that you might have authorized is the one that's on disk?
Like,
There's
I feel like too, like this is where it's like AI sort of taking off is also going to unearth other things that have had models that have been embedded in them software wise for a while. I know like one of the discussions we had early on with like it is around like when you're doing modeling and things like that, like in Blender and some of that, like, and if you are doing lighting and rendering and all of that, like a lot of times you're downloading additional modules or add-ons from a Blender or whatever marketplace, and then it turns out like, hey, what is that using? It's got an embedded pickle file, which is the model that's helping do a lot of those calculations and rendering, but no one's scrutinized that before. It's been very like there hasn't been really viewed as an attack surface. And I think that's the kind of thing that, right, when we talk about supply chain and sort of what's like starting to unearth, this really, ugly and big problem is like, all right, like there's been this proliferation of AI tools, infrastructure, models, especially when you're talking about all the organizations that are like piloting things and trying things out and then just leaving them for bit rot later. It's like, okay, what risk does this actually like materialize as? Because I think that's something that hasn't been like discussed enough, is like what happens when your infrastructure can essentially be used against you.
Yeah, and from the adversarial side, looking at this from that red perspective, it's kind of the Wild West right now. Like I know I was just reading an article before we talked about where there's threats out there that literally are doing like Android rats, but dropping them into Hugging Face, and they're using these open markets and platforms to host their stuff for them, and it's a free watering hole at that point, right?
Yes. Yes.
Like from an infrastructure perspective, I don't need any. You're giving it to me. Like the world's going to go there anyway. It's going to have more trust. I'm not going to be worried about getting blocked by a spam or phishing filter. I'll just go host there. So we're seeing that kind of stuff evolve. I think what's really cool too is to think about, I mean, it's cool from a threat perspective, but from a defender perspective, it's scary. How much information and context you really are giving your model, how much access they're getting, the API keys that you're embedding, all of that data is just stored in simple markdown for the most part, right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you're exactly right. Because adversaries, right? Like this has been always one of the things, like when you're red teaming or whatever, is looking for people looking for things, right? If someone's running discovery, like, hey, where they're looking for docx files or looking for this, it's like we've kind of centralized that all in one place because I want that to help me make decisions, right? I want Claude or whoever to take some of that stuff into context when I am, making a decision based on, a document or a thing. But it also makes it so that one thing is now very, very critical.
Yeah, it's a crown jewel. Because that's, you think about it from like a developer's perspective. It now has context of the projects and tools you're using and working with, API keys maybe to access your GitHub, cloud, whatever else it's doing things with. It has context and information about the organization because you fed all of that in there to it. Maybe you had it help you write a performance review or something. And then it also just has the general permissions and access to that host that you provided it to allow it to do all of the special AI agent things that it does. What's even scarier, though, from a personal perspective, a lot of people are starting to use personal AI agents. Think about the information and access you provided. Like you tie it to your email, your calendars, all of your kids' school stuff. So now it knows like who you all are, where you're at, context to your day, your patterns, habits of life. But it also has access to all of the other things people want to get to so they can, reset accounts, gain access to other things, maybe do some fraud, impersonate you. All of that information is now being tied in to these frameworks, and there's no real visibility over it.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot more. Like I've seen like a huge uptick in audio and like text to speech and some of that models like this, like over the last, I don't know, 6 weeks. It's been just a ton more. So I feel like a lot of this is going to get much more real. Like anybody that's seen 11 Labs and some of that before will know like how far this stuff has progressed. But I think when it starts spreading into everything, it's going to become like, the models aren't just reading something monotone now. They take your speech patterns, your emphasis, and they can do all that modulation, and it makes it seem really, really like it's good from the sense of like, okay, like I can hear something that, is much, much easier to listen to than a monotone voice if I'm listening to something. But I think for those use cases we've seen with social engineering, with fraud, like this is absolutely, it's gonna spiral out really, really fast, unfortunately. And I mean, we've seen some of this already. So I'll go ahead.
Let's say, but I think like every other like new kind of emergence that happens in IT and cybersecurity, we're still on the very front end of this wave where it's in rapid adoption, and then it's going to kind of take a pause, and we'll think about security. Then we'll kind of pick back up and be fine. We just have to all be mindful of what we're doing with it. It's fun to play with. It's fun to experiment, but trust but verify, right?
Yes. Well, let's then at least like work on finishing up here with a positive note, right? That's the thing, because a lot of this, especially in AI security, can be very like, ooh, like, maybe not quite doom and gloom, but sometimes it can feel like that. We're like, all right, security is maybe not able to keep pace with adoption quite yet. Like, what are some positives or good things that you're feeling, at least when it's like, all right, there's at least sparks or rays of hope with some of what we're able to do?
I love the way it's providing people like access to information, and potentially like it's filtered access to information, but it's not biased access to information. So I think that is really interesting. I see it quite a bit with my children and their friends, where they're not as apt to just go Google something anymore. They're going to ask Siri, or they're going to ask Claude and ChatGPT, and that's going to give them multiple options, multiple sources, and none of those are like ad first or biased to whoever that particular vendor was, which is really cool to see their ability to generate new content. Just seeing the way that like people's thought process is changing, that is amazing. As people are starting to ask questions and think about stuff in ways they never did before, actually thinking about the context behind their thoughts and what they're trying to express, because you really have to when you're using these kinds of tools.
Yes, I would agree. And I think that's where, at least for me too, like learning and like getting to like test things out, where you basically need the like to help it challenge you, right, on specific things and your understanding and how you can explain things to it. And I think it's kind of a more private way for a lot of people that are like might be concerned about, hey, looking dumb by asking, you know, an easy or basic question or something like that, when it's like most of the time, like that's something you can go, hey, is my characterization of this right? I've seen a lot of positives with that.
Yep.
Like I said, it's and I think the same, like I'll say, like to dive into where, at least where I feel like some of this is going, and I think it's going to be for a positive in some sense, is like as more of the smaller models become sort of like our models, everything aligned to me, to you, like on our devices, on our phones or whatever, part of that is going to be that having something close hold is going to be like more privacy first. And
Yep.
so there are going to still be the frontier models. There are still going to be things that you reach out to for more complicated things. But I think we are headed towards a world where we are going to have something that's even more powerful than the phone has been, like within arm's reach at all times. And I think while there is, you know, lots of peril that can go with it, I think there's also a good amount of promise in how it can help. But yeah, finding the right balance is the hard part, and I'd say like not going to shy away from it's not going to be easy. And there's definitely going to be lots of problems and bumps along the way, and I think that's kind of where I see the security community is. It's like, hey, we really need more security people entering in this and being part of this conversation, because those are like, as people that have been dealing with adversaries for a long time, right? We need that level of expertise. We need that sort of experience in, all right, how do we deal with, you know, combating whatever the challenges are with this new tech.
Oh, for sure. But I think that was a solid way to wrap up this stream here, good sir.
Well, I appreciate it. And thanks for coming on, sharing your expertise. I mean, any shout outs or things you want to do here at the end? So this is, you know, always a chance to, you know, plug your own blogs, you know, your social handles, whatever you want.
Yeah, I just want to say again, thanks for having me on. For anybody that wants to chat about this kind of stuff more, I'm easily found at that little Twitter handle there. And also at SCYTHE, if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns about what we do when it comes to purple teaming and adversarial emulation, I'm here for it.
Sweet. All right. And I'll say, like we did announce last week, that between Starseer and SCYTHE, we now have a formal partnership going forward. So you're going to see some more stuff with that. I think, Trey, you and I's first blog went out yesterday.
Yes.
So yeah, we'll be, this is a hot topic. We're just getting started.
Has some pretty interesting threats coming out here soon.
Yes. So we'll definitely have you back on, and thanks for coming with us today. Thanks to everybody that tuned in, and these are going to be more regular, so watch for our next one coming up, and we'll talk to you next time.
Yep. Till next time, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.